Today, the Borscht Belt is recalled through the nostalgic lens of summer swims, Saturday night dances, and comedy performances, but its current state, like that of many other formerly glorious regions, is nothing like its earlier status. Forgotten about and exhausted, much of its structural environment has been left to decay. The new book, The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacationland, presents Marisa Scheinfeld's photographs of abandoned sites where resorts, hotels, and bungalow colonies once boomed in the Catskill Mountain region of upstate New York. The Borscht Belt presents a contemporary view of more than 40 hotel and bungalow sites, from entire expanses of abandoned properties to small lots containing drained swimming pools. The remains of the Borscht Belt era now lie forgotten, overgrown, and vacant. Marisa Scheinfeld has two book events in Albany this week, one at the Colony Library tonight, sponsored by the SUNY Albany Judaic Studies Department, and another on Friday evening as part of a special presentation for the New York State History Conference at the New York State Museum from 6:30 to 8:30. We'll give out more information about those events in a moment. But again, the name of the book, The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacationland, and we welcome Marisa Scheinfeld to the roundtable this morning. Thank you very much for being with us. Good to have you back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
So the last time you were here, we were talking about an exhibit.
Correct. I had an exhibit at the Yiddish Book Center. This book has been 5-6 years in the works, and before the book came out, I had a traveling exhibit, which now accompanies the book.
And now, so I assume most, if not all, the photographs are in the book?
There's 129 photographs in the book. The traveling exhibit is much more scaled down, but it's the actual large-scale photographs themselves. And
Right.
It's just closed in Philadelphia. And I have some plans for it, not solid, but hopefully definitely in the Catskills.
What has the reaction been of people looking at the photographs? I assume it's a mix, right? I mean, it's for many it's nostalgia. It's looking at places that they grew up, where they spent a lot of time, and to see them in their current state. And for others, it's an introduction.
The reaction has been very positive. I think that what often helps is my explanation of the work and what I see in it, and how it really is a look at history through a very contemporary lens. Of course, the average Borscht Belter is very quick to look at the photographs and say words like sad and, what a shame. But a minute later, their perspective will shift when, like you said, a memory or something nostalgic is evoked. And I think the project has a lot of layers, like an onion.
I will let you do this initially, and that is, for people listening to us on the radio, describe the type of photo that you set out to take.
Sure. So I set out to document the past and what remained of it. And when looking at resorts and hotels that once were part of the Borscht Belt, or specifically the abandoned ones, I went in with a medium format camera. I'm shooting on film and was striving to document the spaces as I found them, as I see them. The color is very true. The photographs are unmanipulated, and there are various ruins lying in states of entire compounds or just singular pools lying in the woods. Lots of color, lots of texture, and really ravaged by time and also people.
Let's talk for a moment about just the numbers. How many resorts did you photograph?
Over 40, but there's 40 in the book. In the process of editing, some were dropped. But I tried to find as many relics, as many sites as I could, and I was only focusing on the ones that are stagnant. There are many hotels that have been repurposed, whether they're meditation centers, rehabilitation centers, Orthodox destinations, secular destinations. I wanted to look at the ones that are considered eyesores, almost like looming creatures of failure that are dotted across the land.
Of those, how many still exist now?
Of the ones that are...
Of the 40, are they still in their current state, of the state that when you photographed them?
No, some of them are completely gone. I went back to one called the Palms. It's in the book, and all you can see is the letter S at the end of the word Palms, and that hotel has been leveled.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see, what remains structurally will will be gone in a matter of time. Grossinger's just announced they're going to spend $2 million to demolish the entire hotel with an unnamed project in the works.
So you find these places, which are, when we think of the Catskills, give us the geography here, because it is the overall swath of the state really isn't that large, is it? There are a lot of resorts in one part of the state.
Yeah, so I'm photographing in the southernmost part of the Catskills, which is 90 miles exactly from New York City, in Sullivan County, a little bit of Ulster County.
Sullivan and Ulster.
And
right.
the Borscht Belt was primarily in that region, catering to American Jews, offering entertainment, leisure. It was known as the birthplace of stand-up comedy, and it has a lot of history that has transcended into American popular culture. You have greats like Joan Rivers, Jerry Seinfeld, Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, all who got their start up in the region. And there's a ton of history.
There is a ton of history. I think I said to you the last time you were here that I knew a lot about the Catskills because of my father, who was very interested in the subject, and also as a Catholic also grew up in that region and knew a lot and frequented a lot of these resorts. So I knew them growing up as a kid. But the one thing that always that it was through a project that we did for the radio on the Catskills, and I had the opportunity, just as these places were in many cases going out of business, Grossinger's being one, Concord, and many others, and talking to people who comedians who got their starts there, and people who work there, and I learned so much about the region. And but I want to touch on something that you mentioned, because there is such warmth and such nostalgia that is there for so many people. When they look at this now, as you said, I mean, it would seem to me that there is a sadness to that it's no longer.
Without a doubt, there's a pathos that runs through the entire project, a sadness, but it's more about loss, and it's also about change and the evolution of things, particularly on the structural built environment where all of this history took place. There's so many memoirs and archival books about the Borscht Belt. People have written about it in a very nostalgic way, and this book is actually a departure from the typical Borscht Belt nostalgia, the kitsch. It's very present day, very unruly environments and spaces. And it's just been my obsession, if you will, these degraded tokens of a very grand era.
When you set out, let's talk about the pools. A lot of pools.
Yeah, tons of pools. I could have done a whole book on pools.
Now, of course, that was a main part of many of the resorts, was the centerpiece of the resort was the pool.
The pool was like a lobby where you just sat and watched people and chatted.
And it's also harder, I assume, to kind of decay and unearth, right. So tell us about your documentation of these pools.
Well, the pools were often probably the most exciting for me, because what I'd find would be a tree, larger than me, multiple feet up in the air, just growing through the foundation, through the concrete, ferns growing through the pools, and they would really be just like all to the wilderness, completely taken back. And there is a romantic feeling, I think, that it is evoked with the idea of the rune, a wow factor. How did this become like this? And there's a sadness and there's a longing. But for me, I think the project has a lot of metaphors about the life cycle and about the birth and the death of everything and all the spaces in between.
You have a picture here of the Nevele. That was one of the last to go, wasn't it?
It was. And it is in the most intact physical condition.
A round building. I've stayed at this place. It is it's remarkable. It was even then. It went out 2008, 2009, somewhere in there.
It was a convention center before it closed.
Yeah, and then eventually. But I just remember thinking that, because even when you went there, you felt like you were walking back in time. So even as some of these places clung on, they still were like walking back in time.
Yeah, and the architecture was very mid-century modern, built in the 50s and 60s, and I don't think that really changed as you get into the 80s and 90s when many of them closed.
And yet, and from my understanding, and I know this obviously isn't the focus of your work, but I know you know this information, which is that in a lot of cases, they're still looking to bring these places back, and what do you do with them? Can we rehab it? Can we rebuild? Can we bring another resort? And none of those efforts have been all that successful, have they?
There is, from what I personally see, I'm 36. I grew up in that area. My parents have been there since I'm 5. Always this hope of what is going to happen next, what is going to change. And I do see something happening, which is a resurgence of pride in the area. You have the new casino that's being built on the site of the Concord,
Right.
and that is happening. It is going to come together. The Nevele, speaking of the Nevele, they wanted to be a casino. They're approved to be a sports destination. So whether they bring in little league or minor league teams, I think that they will salvage a lot of the pieces of it. The skating rink, that building, the circular building.
When you think of I want to get to, you have pictures of skates in here, and it's a nice reminder because these were year-round resorts.
Year-round. Yep.
Yeah.
Obviously the busiest in the summer, known and
Yes.
depicted in the summer even through mainstream movies, but year-round. And the seasons played such a role in my childhood growing up there that I needed to capture the state of the Borscht Belt in all 4 seasons because each yielded a different color, a different texture. And to me, to a photographer, looking at that under different conditions of light was what kept me going and kept me interested to go back to the same hotel dozens of times.
You did not want to, in this particular project, you let the photographs speak for themselves. You don't add a lot of history or information as to when they were built, when they were torn down, all of that. You let them stand for themselves, which I think is quite beautiful. It makes them more stark.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a photograph should stand for itself. I think any work of art is interpreted with all that we bring to it, what we're programmed to think in our psyche, in our current mode. And I do have 3 essays in the book, one that I wrote, one that's by Jenna Weissman-Josselit, who unpacks the work so eloquently, as well as the history, and one by Stefan Kanfer. And I think that amount of text is perfect. And this is a photography book. I mean,
Right.
That's what it is. And I want the photographs to be laid on the pages as they are, in that order, telling you a story and leading you back through the Borscht Belt. Essentially, that's why I called it revisiting. I want people to reconsider it.
For the most part, and again, all stories are different, but for the most part, what was the beginning of where do you see the beginning of the end for these resorts, of when they started to decline?
Historians have said 1965, with the boom of the airline business, with the signing of the Anti-Discrimination Act that now allowed Jews and many others to vacation and go wherever they would like. The reason why the Borscht Belt began was because in the 20s, Jews were banned from many hotels in this country. So moving ahead to the mid-60s, there's a lot going on. There's a changing role of women, entry into the workforce, family dynamic shift. Many people say the growth of suburbia. Some people even say air conditioning contributed. I think you can talk about the reasons from now till the end of the year. And I think also in the simplest, it just had its day.
I do remember. I believe Stefan saying in the piece that we did of the easiest thing is the 3 A's of airlines, assimilation, and air conditioning. Those were kind of the big 3. Because you'd want to get out of the city to get and go and find air conditioning and stay cool.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the world changed and it opened itself up to the many people who had gone to this space who felt it was not cool anymore. It was not in vogue. And what's sad is that, Jews left the Catskills on their own volition. No one forced them out. They came because they were excluded, but they left because they were now assimilated and able to blend and merge into wherever else they ever wanted to go.
Marisa Scheinfeld is the author of the photographer for the book, The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land. And has a couple events that we'll talk about in a moment coming up tonight and tomorrow night. There's great beauty in these photographs, and one just on the front cover of a lawn chair taken, I assume, in a pool room.
Correct. That's the indoor pool at Grossinger's.
At Grossinger's. And do you, since this project, as you said, has been over many years, have you gone back to any of these locations to catch up and to see where they are now?
Yeah, I was just at Grossinger's about a month ago. I encountered over a dozen people when I was there doing all sorts of things.
What does that mean?
I went. Good question.
I don't know what you mean by that.
I went to go film a video with a local newspaper, the Times Herald Record. We encountered people taking pieces of broken glass from the indoor pool who were going to piece it together in some sort of like installation in their home. I encountered other photographers. I encountered kids who were skateboarding. Someone told me the other day that they went to Grossinger's and someone threw a chair at them from above, and it seems as if there are people who have been camping out and living in the hotel.
Wow.
It's almost in a peculiar, weird way. It's still open.
Yeah, that it hasn't been completely uninhabited.
I wouldn't advise anyone that's listening in to go there. It is very unstable. It is dangerous. For me, I forged friends wherever I went with this project, where I learned where to go, where not to go, getting permission. And even though what I'm photographing is abandoned, people are monitoring all these sites.
How do you get permission?
Being really persistent. Also, I'm from there. So there was always someone who knew someone that was willing to help me out, even if they didn't understand why the heck I wanted to do this and why I wanted to spend the entire day at a moldy, infested hotel.
Why do you think first of all, how do you term this type of photography?
Contemporary photographs.
Okay.
You can call it documentary if you'd like. Yeah.
Why do you think that we like to see, we as an audience, and I ask this question because I'm interested of why I am drawn to it, of seeing these things that have been left, that are in a state of decay, that there is something beautiful and emotional about looking at these photographs?
I think it's the very nature of the ruin itself and the many heartstrings that it can pull on, from very dark to very light, from sad to things that almost make you laugh, where you look through the book and there's a table set up and you're wondering who set this table up like this and why. Photographers have been traipsing to ruins since the birth of the medium. Right. There's long been a fascination with everything that they can make you feel and wonder and question, and often those questions are never answered. So I think that's what keeps you going back for more and keeps you looking.
Are you as interested in other dilapidated sites as you would be about this because of the familial and the connection that you have to the region?
It's a great question. I thought about that a lot recently because a lot of times people will point out something to me like, check out this abandoned zoo or theme park. I feel like I wanted to give light to my hometown. Mm-hmm. And the state that it's in, of course, is thrilling and very intriguing for me to have been working on this for 5 upwards of 6 years. I can't say that my next project won't have that element of decay because I love to look at the landscape, and I think what history has left behind is really the root of what I'm interested in. But it just happens to be that my subject is full of decay. I'm not necessarily going to be going out to make a book entirely of decay again. And it was never going to be all about decay. My mentor said to me when I was working on this project that a photographic series should be like a song. It shouldn't hit the same note the entire time. And that's why hotels like the Nevele, hotels that closed more recently, really helped to balance out the book, because I did not want it to be all about entropy and detritus and just like gunk on skates and, patinas of time and rust. I really wanted to see the flowering and the more intact spaces that were just abandoned, that were just empty and quiet.
Were you ever up against time where they say, "Oh, they're going to tear this down in 3 weeks, so I have to get there now"?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I was up against time the entire time, driving by, noticing a bungalow colony, hearing word that they were going to knock it down, going on the day that they were knocking it down and begging them to give me a hard hat and letting me photograph. It is about time, and time is always ticking. And I'm going to try to be at Grossinger's when they take the official wrecking ball to it.
And how does that make you feel?
I think it makes me feel a variety of different things. It makes me feel sad, but it also makes me feel hopeful that the clearing of the terrain will sprout something new. You know, no one has stepped in to preserve these spaces. That's what's very unfortunate.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, is that
there's no
sort of what's been
historical
lost
marker. There is nothing that says, like, here is the Borscht Belt. There's no museum dedicated to it. And believe me, that's like a pipe dream of mine. But I think that the act of photography is an act of preservation in itself. It is a slice that this exists. This was here. And in that sense, I feel like I have preserved the spaces, even if people, frankly, are disgusted with the way that they look. I think that there's a peculiar beauty to them. Yeah.
I remember going to the Concord, and they were having an auction. They were auctioning off all of the contents.
Furniture
And of course you're walking around and you're seeing all of this stuff, and it feels like you've gone into the home of someone who just passed. And there is a sadness, but you do wonder where all that stuff ended up. Is there anyone sort of who went in there initially to look at it, to take items of significance out, to protect them, and so that there could be some kind of memorial museum?
Well,
something.
there is the Catskills Institute in Phil Brown, which is an online repository of hundreds and hundreds of pieces of material and documentation. I'm a big collector. I have a lot of ephemera. I'm actually going to install some of it at the New York State Museum this afternoon. It'll be on view tomorrow. I'm sure many people have it in their home, but I'm not aware that there's one major repository. The Center for Jewish History has a Grossinger's archive. I think they're scattered.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
They're
there's
around.
not one cohesive space.
So what is next for you?
What is next for me? I'm tinkering away with some more ideas to start a new project, and time will tell what it becomes. It is going to be me looking at the land. I'm going to break out into a more universal story without a doubt. This was very enjoyable to do, but I feel like I need to move forward.
The new book is The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Marisa will also has two book events this week, tonight and tomorrow, one at the Colony Library, which is sponsored by the SUNY Albany Judaic Studies Department, and another on Friday, tomorrow night, as part of a special presentation of the New York State History Conference at the New York State Museum. That's from 6:30 to 8:30, and books will be available at both places, and of course books available throughout our region and our wonderful independents. Again, it is The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land. Marisa Scheinfeld, thank you so much for being with us. What a great pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
Thank you very much. You're listening to The Roundtable on WAMC.